I'm Julia, and I've always loved my work as a biologist. Discovering new species, studying them, unraveling the mysteries of nature. It's what I live for. But if I knew what this last discovery would bring into my life, I would have never set foot in that damn lab. It all started on an ordinary day at the lab. I was working late, as usual, trying to catch up on some reports. My colleague Laurel was out that day, and it was just me and Bill, the janitor. Bill's a nice guy, a bit of a chatterbox, but harmless enough. I was about to call it a night when I heard a noise. A soft, slithering sound, like something wet being dragged across the floor. I thought maybe Bill had spilled something, but I went to check it out. In the corner of the lab, near the storage room, I found it. A small, shapeless mass, almost like a blob of jelly. It was dark, with a texture that seemed to shift and pulse as I stared at it. I've seen a lot of strange creatures in my line of work, but this one was different. It didn't move like any animal I knew. It didn't look like it should be alive, but it was. I could see it breathing, if you could call it that. Called Bill over, and we stared at the thing together. "What the hell is that?" Bill asked, his voice shaky. "I don't know," I replied, more intrigued than scared at that moment. "But we need to find out." I decided to bring the creature into the lab for further study. I figured it might be some new species, something we could write a paper on. Bill wasn't so sure. "You sure that's a good idea, Julia? That thing gives me the creeps." I laughed it off, telling him not to worry. I should have listened to him. Over the next few days, I kept the creature in a sealed tank, studying its behavior. It didn't do much at first, just sat there, pulsating slightly, like it was breathing or thinking. I ran all sorts of tests, temperature changes, exposure to light, different types of food. Nothing seemed to provoke a reaction. It was like it was waiting for something. Then one night, I noticed something strange. The creature had changed shape. It wasn't just a blob anymore. It had started to form limbs. Not fully, just small protrusions that looked like tiny arms or legs. I was fascinated. It was like watching evolution happen right before my eyes. Couldn't wait to show Laurel, but she was still out, dealing with a family emergency. So I kept my findings to myself and continued my research. That was my first mistake. A few days later, I came into the lab early, eager to check on the creature. But when I got there, the tank was empty. My heart stopped. I panicked, thinking it had somehow escaped. I searched the entire lab, but there was no sign of it. I was about to call Bill when I heard a rustling sound behind me. I turned around, and there it was. The creature had slithered out of the tank and was now sitting on the lab table. But it wasn't the same blob I had found. It had changed, grown, even. It had a more defined shape now, like a small, grotesque version of a human. It was still black and slimy, but its form was unmistakable. It had arms, legs, and a head, though no eyes, no mouth, just a smooth, featureless face. I didn't know what to do. I was scared, but also fascinated. The creature slowly raised one of its arms and pointed it at me. Then, before I could react, it started to change again. Its skin rippled and its body twisted and contorted until it didn't look like a creature anymore. It looked like me. I stumbled back, my heart racing. This thing had taken on my shape, my face. But it wasn't perfect. It was still off, like a twisted, grotesque version of me. Its skin was too smooth, its eyes too wide, its movements too stiff. "What the hell are you?" I whispered, more to myself than to the creature. It didn't respond, just stood there, mimicking my every move. I raised my hand, and it did the same. I took a step back, and it followed. My fear was slowly turning into terror. I had to get out of there, had to find help. But before I could do anything, the creature lunged at me. I barely had time to react, throwing myself to the side as it crashed into the lab equipment, sending glass and chemicals flying everywhere. I scrambled to my feet and ran for the door, not daring to look back. I made it to my car and drove home as fast as I could. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. What was that thing? How had it taken my shape? And more importantly, what was I going to do about it? When I got home, Erik was in the kitchen, staring blankly at the TV. He had been out of work for months now, and the depression was taking its toll on him. I wanted to tell him what had happened, but I knew he wouldn't understand. Hell, I didn't understand it myself. "Everything okay?" Erik asked, not taking his eyes off the TV. "Yeah," I lied, forcing a smile. "Just a rough day at the lab." I went to bed that night, but sleep didn't come easy. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that creature wearing my face coming at me. I kept telling myself it was just a nightmare, that I'd wake up and everything would be fine. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. The real nightmare was just beginning. The next morning, I was still shaken, but I forced myself to go back to the lab. I needed to know if the creature was still there, or if I had imagined the whole thing. When I arrived, the place was eerily quiet. I half expected to find the lab in ruins, but everything was just as I had left it. Except for one thing. The creature was gone. The shattered glass and spilled chemicals were still there, but the creature vanished. I didn't have time to process what that meant because Laurel finally showed up. She noticed something was off right away. "Julia, you look like you've seen a ghost. What's going on?" I hesitated. I wasn't sure how to explain what I'd seen. "Laurel, something really strange happened last night." "Creature. It changed. Took on my form, like a twisted version of me. And now it's gone." Laurel frowned, clearly skeptical, but worried. "Are you sure you weren't just tired? Maybe it was a trick of the light." "I'm not crazy, Laurel. It was real. I saw it. I felt it." She sighed and put a hand on my shoulder. "Let's look at the security footage. Maybe that'll give us some answers." We went to the security room and pulled up the footage from the night before. My heart pounded as we fast-forwarded through the empty lab. Then, around 2 a.m., we saw it. Creature still in its blob form, slithering out of the tank. We watched in stunned silence as it slowly morphed, taking on my shape right before our eyes. And then it looked directly into the camera. My face staring back at us, but with a cold, lifeless expression. Laurel gasped. "Oh my God, Julia, it really did become you." I didn't know what to say. Seeing it on the screen made it even more terrifying, more real. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still out there somewhere, wearing my face. As the days went by, things only got worse. I started noticing strange things happening around me. My dog Max began acting weird. He would growl and bark at me, something he'd never done before. Erik's behavior also changed. He became distant, almost like he was scared of me. And then there were the glimpses. Moments when I'd catch a reflection in the mirror, and for a split second, it wasn't me staring back. It was the creature. One night I came home late, exhausted from work. I found Erik sitting in the dark, staring at the wall. "Erik, what's wrong?" I asked, flipping on the light. He didn't answer, just turned his head slowly to look at me. There was something off about him. His eyes, they didn't seem right. Cold, empty, like the creature's. "Erik, are you okay?" I stepped closer, but he recoiled, his eyes wide with fear. "You're not Julia," he whispered, backing away. You're it. What are you talking about?" "It's me, Julia." I was desperate, terrified of what he might do. But Erik shook his head violently. No, you're not her. I've seen it. The thing, it's you." Before I could say anything, he grabbed a kitchen knife from the counter. "Stay away from me," he shouted, his voice trembling with fear and rage. "Erik, put the knife down. It's me. It's really me." But he wasn't listening. He lunged at me, and I barely dodged the blade. We struggled, and in the chaos, I managed to knock the knife out of his hand. But Erik wasn't done. He tackled me to the ground, pinning me down with a strength I didn't know he had. "You're not her. You're not Julia," he kept shouting, his face twisted in a mix of terror and madness. In a desperate move, I kicked him off me and scrambled to my feet. But before I could do anything else, I heard a soft, slithering sound behind me. I turned just in time to see the creature, my double, emerging from the shadows, its hand clutching the very same knife Erik had just dropped. "No," I whispered, paralyzed with fear. The creature looked at me, its expressionless face somehow filled with intent, and then it turned its attention to Erik. Before I could react, it lunged at him, slashing the knife across his throat. Blood sprayed across the walls as Erik collapsed to the floor, choking on his own blood, his eyes wide with shock and terror. "Erik!" I screamed, rushing to his side, but it was too late. He was gone. My husband was dead, and the creature, the thing that had taken my face, was standing over his body, the knife still dripping with his blood. I was frozen in place, my mind unable to process what was happening. The creature turned its cold, empty eyes to me, and for a moment I thought it would kill me too. But then, it dropped the knife and started to shift again, its form rippling and contorting until it was no longer a twisted version of me. It was an exact replica. It looked exactly like me, down to the smallest detail. And then it spoke, in my voice. "You're next." I didn't wait to find out what it meant. I grabbed the knife and slashed at the creature, but it was fast, too fast. It dodged my attack and lunged at me, knocking me to the ground. We struggled, rolling across the kitchen floor, but I managed to get the upper hand. I drove the knife into its side, expecting it to scream, to react in pain, but it didn't. Instead, it laughed, horrible, mocking sound that echoed in my ears. "You can't kill me," it hissed, voice still mine, but distorted, twisted. "I am you." With all the strength I had left, I shoved the creature away and scrambled to my feet. It came at me again, but this time I was ready. I slashed at it with the knife, cutting deep into its flesh. Black, tar-like blood oozed from the wounds, but it didn't stop. Kept coming, relentless, unstoppable. In a final act of desperation, I grabbed a bottle of cleaning fluid from the counter and threw it at the creature. Chemicals splashed across its face, and it let out a blood-curdling scream. Its skin started to melt, its form unraveling before my eyes. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I grabbed the knife and ran, bursting out of the house and into the night. I didn't stop running until I reached the police station. It burst in, covered in blood and tears, babbling about the creature, about Erik. The officers looked at me like I was crazy, but I didn't care. I just wanted it to be over. But it wasn't. The police went to my house, and what they found wasn't what I expected. Erik was dead, just as I'd said. There was no creature, no twisted double. Just me, or rather, what they thought was me. They found fingerprints on the knife. My fingerprint. The blood on my clothes was Erik's, and the security footage from my home? It showed me, not the creature, attacking Erik, killing him in cold blood. They didn't believe me when I tried to explain. How could they? The story was too insane, too impossible. I was arrested, charged with murder. As they dragged me away, I caught a glimpse of myself in the rearview mirror of the police car. And I saw it. Creature looking back at me, smiling with my face, my eyes. It had taken my life, my identity, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. So now, here I am, telling you my story from a prison cell, awaiting trial for a crime I didn't commit. But it wasn't me. It was never me. It was the creature, the thing that became me.